Hi everyone, my name is Ronaldin Rojas, and today I'll be presenting on Indigenous land rights and displacement, the case of Mount Rushmore. This presentation explores how the creation of Mount Rushmore reflects a long history of Indigenous land laws and how those issues continue to affect native communities today. Background information. The Black Hills or Paha Sapa are sacred lands to the Lakota Sioux Nation, located in South Dakota. In 1868, the Fort Laramie Treaty promised that this land would belong to the Sioux people. However, when gold was discovered there, just a few years later, the US government broke that treaty and seized the land. In the 1920s, sculptor Gotzon Borglum began carving Mount Rushmore into the granite cliffs without consent from the indigenous people. The monument features four U.S. presidents: George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Theodore Roosevelt, and Abraham Lincoln. It's meant to symbolize the nation's birth, growth, development, and preservation. Borglum intentionally chose those presidents to represent major stages in America's history, its founding, expansion, and unity. But this vision completely ignored the people whose land it was built on. For the Lakota Sioux, Mount Rushmore is not a symbol of pride. It represents colonization, broken promises, and the erasure of indigenous culture and sacred land. Geographic area. Mount Rushmore sits within the Black Hills region, a place filled with spiritual and cultural significance. Nearby sites like Bear Butte and Wind Cave hold deep meaning for the Lakota people. These areas are not just pieces of land, they are part of their identity, ceremonies, and histories. When these lands were taken and turned into monuments or tourist attractions, indigenous people lost not only territory but access to sacred spaces that connect them to their ancestors and traditions. Current day summary. The fight over the Black Hills continues today. Modern indigenous activists and movements like Land Back continue to demand the return of these lands or shared governance over them. There's also a growing push for co-managing national parks and protecting sacred sites through indigenous-led environmental justice. For many Native Americans, Mount Rushmore stands as a reminder that justice for indigenous nations is still unfinished. This is not just a past issue. It's a living struggle for sovereignty, respect, and cultural survival. Cultural aspects or experiences. Mount Rushmore represents disrespect and dispossession for many indigenous peoples, especially the Lakota Sioux. What is celebrated by some as a national monument is viewed by others as a painful symbol of stolen land and broken promises. The monument reflects white nationalist ideals that celebrate expansion and dominance, while indigenous voices and histories were pushed aside. In contrast, the nearby Crazy Horse Memorial, led by Native people, stands for resilience, strength, and reclamation, a powerful response to centuries of erasure. This issue also connects with race, showing the ongoing impact of white dominance. with socioeconomic status, since land loss and exclusion have left many tribes in poverty, and with cultural identity as indigenous communities continue to fight for recognition, language preservation, and sovereignty. Implications for education. This issue has important implications for education. When we look at indigenous land rights and displacement, we're not just talking about history. We're also talking about how loss of culture and identity continues to affect indigenous students and communities today. This means that many indigenous students may experience feelings of exclusion when their histories and perspectives are not represented in the curriculum. Teaching about Mount Rushmore only as a patriotic symbol, including without including its impact on indigenous people, can reinforce cultural erasure. By incorporating indigenous perspectives, educators promote cultural humility, critical thinking, and a sense of belonging among all students. Additional information. Mount Rushmore was carved under the direction of Gatson Borglum from 1927 to 1941, and after his death, his son Lincoln Borglum finished the work. Over 400 workers helped carve the mountain, using dynamite and fine tools to shape the president's face from the granite rock. In 1980, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that the Black Hills were taken unconstitutionally and awarded $120.5 million in compensation, but it was never accepted, now valued at over $1 billion. But the Sioux Nation still refuses the money, standing by their right to the land itself. As a response, in 1939, the Sioux chief Henry Standing Bear invited sculptor Korshak Shulkowski to create the Crazy Horse Memorial in the Black Hills as a native response to Mount Rushmore. In conclusion, Mount Rushmore may be seen by many as a patriotic landmark, but for the Sioux Nation, it's a painful reminder of loss and survival. Understanding this history challenges us to think critically about whose stories are celebrated and whose are silenced. As future educators and professionals, it's our responsibility to acknowledge these truths and use them to promote respect, inclusion, and cultural understanding. Thank you so much for listening.